today. My name is Prab Rom, and I'm the Sustainability Manager of the Center for Sustainability Management, or SCSM. I'm also the President of the Net Impact Bangkok Professional Chapter. And today our speaker does not need a lot of introduction, but before we get there, let me run through our upcoming events for you first. Tomorrow we have a networking night at Roadhouse Barbecue, very informal get-together, featuring a speaker, Dr. Sompan, who is the Executive Director of the Center of Excellence for Hazardous Waste Management from Chulalongkorn University, and she will be our speaker tomorrow night, and it will be very interesting, and the food is really good, so we invite you to sign up for the free Net Impact membership if you haven't already, so you can pay the lower fee for the never-ending sangria, beer, and really good food tomorrow night. And on Saturday, we have a trip to the Energalia facilities across the river. It's their new facilities where they grow algae, spirulina to be exact. And it's a very interesting, sustainable business. They also grow spirulina on top of the Novotel Siam, and now they have this new site, so we want to go and visit it. And then we also have coming up in March a talk by Chris Seeley, who is the CEO of Climate Change Solutions. He was formerly at the Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Foundation, for several years, and now he has his own consultancy. Yeah, and we also have a workshop. Sorry, I forgot the workshop. Yes, Alex's free workshop on the 26th. Yeah, and it's on stakeholders and how important they are to your company's future and stakeholder value. So that's at 9 o'clock. It's a Thursday, on the 26th of February. And then in March, we have a trip to Sansari's The Good Space, which is a child-friendly space at their construction site for the children of their construction workers, which would be quite interesting. So coming to our speaker today, we have a very good turnout because he's very popular. Voranai Vanijaka was formerly the socio-political commentator in the Bangkok Post, as we all know, and now he's the editor-in-chief of GQ magazine Thailand. And for those of you who don't know what GQ is, it's a really sexy male magazine that we girls like too. And he was awarded Writer of the Year in 2011 of the Mamrachwong Ayumongkon Sornakun Award for the Sunday columns. He's a frequent commentator on Thai politics for both for the international media and in local and international seminars and forums, and he has hosted 3 TV shows in the past. So we would like to hear about his perspective on is there such a thing as ethical journalism. So without further ado, please give him a warm welcome.
Usually when I give a talk, I don't have any slides to run through that, and I don't have any notes either. But this is the first time I have actually jot down some notes because I'm actually speaking about a topic that I think doesn't exist in reality, and that is journalistic thinking. On my Facebook, there's a news feed. And every day on the news feed, I will see news articles, usually articles of the tabloid nature about the entertainment industry or the celebrity culture. Lately, one of the most popular news stories is about a certain actress who allegedly stole her husband and then lost her husband, and then allegedly found herself in the news with many different men. And lastly, lately, found herself on the cover of a very popular magazine, very naked, very greasy, with 2 very naked, very greasy guys. There's a lot of hints right there. So at least half the room want to know what we're talking about. Now, when those news stories, or that particular news story, come up in my Facebook newsfeed, there will be tens of thousands of views, thousands of clicks, like or unlike, hundreds and thousands of comments on said story. And a lot of the comments will be people expressing outrage at the news organization for reporting such story. They will condemn such story. Disgusting, not worthy. Why are you wasting time reporting on something like this? This is so unethical. Don't you have any journalistic ethic? This is nobody's business. Why are you doing this? Blah, 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 blah. And as I read these comments, I say to myself, well, as long as you're clicking on it, reading it, commenting on it, they will publish the story. Because that's how we measure a successful story. At least on the internet, it is by how many views, how many clicks, and how many comments. And I'm certain that those very same people will click on every news story of this nature and will make comment on every story of this nature, condemning the lack of ethics. And I think that sort of captured the point I want to make today. In the news media, we work for the bottom line like everyone else. We are measured by the amount of advertisement we get, the sponsorship that we get, and also these sensationalized, quote-unquote, unethical stories work. They work well. People love it, people consume it, people just love to be entertained. And as long as the people want it, we'll keep doing it because we are giving the people what they want. What is wrong with giving the people what they want? And in return, we get a higher profit margin. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. What is wrong with that? Now, I teach at Thammasat University in the Department of Journalism and Mass Media. And in my class on the first day, I will teach them the pyramid. The pyramid that has 3 points: the government, the media, and the people. And in my lecture, I will always assume that the government will always be corrupted, politicians will always be scumbags, who look to exploit and take advantage of the people. And not just the government, big business also. Big business also always corrupted, looking to exploit for the profit margin. And as we all know, in a capitalistic society or in any society, government and big business are always one and the same, in bed together. And because that's the nature of government and big business, we, the media, the virtuous, moral, heroic media, we take it upon us to act as the check and balance, to make sure that the people get the truth, to make sure that the people will not be exploited by government and big business, to make sure that they can't corrupt, to make sure that the people get the information that they need to get in order to make that decision in everyday life, in order to make the decision when they go to the booth and vote, something we can't do anymore in Thailand, but that's another topic. Our job is to check and to balance. So we have a balance of power. We are an important component of democracy. Without us, democracy cannot work. Because information is power. Now, I went on the internet and searched the meaning of the word journalistic ethic, because I didn't know before that we had such a thing. Now, according to the Society of Professional Journalists, whoever they are, they believe that the public enlightenment is a foreigner of justice and the foundation of democracy, and therefore ethical journalism strives to ensure the free exchange of information that is accurate, fair, and thorough. And ethical journalists act with integrity. Now, this society outlined 4 points, 4 simple points about being ethical journalist. Number 1, seek the truth and report it. Number 2, minimize harm. Number 3, act independently. Number 4, be accurate and transparent. And I will now beg to differ on all of them. You can kind of sense where this is going, right? It's more fun to be negative. 1. Seek the truth and report it. If you actually look at the landscape of mainstream media, you will see that what we seek is the most sensationalized story, to report it in the most sensationalized way, under the pretext of good journalism. Minimize harm. This just means whatever you write, don't get sued, don't get closed down. Be careful. Act independently. Act independently. But you do have to answer to your editor, who answer to the chief editor, who answer to the CEO, who answer to the board of directors, who answer to the big shareholders, who are the elite ruling group of the country, whose main interest is their bottom line and the preservation of the status quo that will keep them as the ruling group of the country. And therefore, you can tell the truth. You can expose certain stories. The game is played in such a way that they, up there, will make sacrificial lambs for the people every now and again to keep the people happy. It's like the Roman emperors having gladiatorial combat, sacrificing the Christian. You have to keep the people happy. But whatever you do, you cannot upset the status quo. You cannot upset the social hierarchy. You cannot upset the balance or imbalance of power that exists in every society. Be accountable and transparent by hiding behind the phrase freedom of speech. And throw around the word undemocratic and fascist to anyone who may have a problem with you. Now, what is ethics anyway? Ethics is a moral philosophy to separate between right and wrong, or what we perceive as right and wrong. But I would say that it doesn't work in the real world, because moral standard is not how we measure our everyday existence. We measure our everyday existence by power and money. The reason we get up every morning and go to work is to make money, because we have bills to pay, we have family to take care of, so on and so forth. I have to wear this tie. There is no purpose whatsoever of a tie, no useful function whatsoever, but I put on this tie because that is what we do as humans. That's the reality, that's the bottom line. So I would say that moral ethic is something that we talk about. It's something that is a class that universities create in order to get the students to pay to take the class money. Books that people write in order to sell to make money. Ethic is a good thing. Ethic is a wonderful thing. We should always have to continue to talk about it, to debate about it, and to push it, so on and so forth. But the reality is, at the end of the day, what defines who we are is the bottom line, the money that we make. 40,000 years ago, when the Neanderthals were roaming Europe, they became extinct. When the Homo sapiens, our ancestor, migrated to Europe, they became extinct through spread of disease, and basically they got wiped out by our ancestor, Homo sapiens. There was nothing ethical about it. It was simply a matter of the power to survive, competing for limited resource, for land, for cattle, for animals to hunt. When the Greeks sacked Troy, it wasn't because of the moral ethic of adultery. Don't believe Brad Pitt in that movie, nothing to do with Helen. It was to control the Mediterranean trade, power and wealth. When the missionaries go out all over the world with a mission to save the souls of the brown-skinned and black-skinned heathens, it wasn't, they did it because of Christian virtues, but they got there on the ships of the kings of Europe for the purpose of conquering, colonializing, and controlling trade and resource and make money. The bottom line always So when George Bush talked about spreading freedom and democracy around the world, that's fine too. But also the reason to conquer Afghanistan is also to put a check on China's encroachment into Central Asia, to put a check on Russia from underneath the belt, to sandwich Iran between US control Iraq and US control Afghanistan, and to check to the two nuclear powers of Pakistan and Pakistan and India. Why? Again, power, hegemony, balance or imbalance of power. So why is journalism any different? Journalistic ethic, business ethic, political ethic, again, these are classes you teach in schools. And they must be continued to teach. Teaching is important, but at the end of the day, we operate in a world of power and wealth. That's the world we live in. It's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing, it's just the way that it is. Now, let's be more specific. In the West, journalistic ethic. Journalistic ethic is something you strive for, but it's something that will always be contained and controlled. By, for example, the Homeland Security Act. You can't compromise national security, it doesn't matter what the ethics say. Ever heard of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden? We can report on them, but look at what happened to them. When you threaten the status quo, when you threaten the top group ruling the country, they will get you. They will stamp you out. They will mess you up. Journalistic ethic will always be at the mercy of those who are in charge of each individual country. All you have to say is a matter of national securities. Journalistic ethic. I can take a symbol that millions of people around the world love and worship and revere. I can take that symbol, then I can make a cartoon out of this symbol, I can mock this symbol, I can make joke, I can make fun, I can trample this symbol underneath my Bali shoes. I'm not wearing Bali, by the way, just like to project that image. I can do all that. And if those millions of people have problem with me, all I have to say is, hey baby, freedom of speech. You go hurting, foreign speaking terrorists, freedom of speech. If you don't like it, you are undemocratic, you are fascist, you are a terrorist. That's journalistic ethic. But these are just isolated, tiny examples. At the core, I would always contend that mainstream media is a business organization like any other business organization, including universities. We are at the mercies of our advertisers, our sponsors, no matter what. If we become too controversial, we make trouble. Advertisers threaten to pull ads. 9 out of 10 times, if not 10 out of 10 times, we will get down. I can write stories to expose and to tell the truth, all I want. But when I hand it in, it doesn't get published, that's still bad. People compromise their own ethical standard. We are all humans. We all have agenda. Political agenda, cultural agenda, moral agenda, so on and so forth. In the mainstream media, usually the world order, you are normally divided into conservative media and liberal media. And already that means your ethics, in my opinion, is compromised. To seek the truth and report it accurately, you can't have such agenda. But we are human. We can't help it. We either support the Republicans or the Democrats, and in Thailand, you're either yellow or you're red. You have an agenda. And how can you not have an agenda? If you don't have the agenda, then what are you? You are a traitor. You don't care about your country. I don't know how many times I have written my articles. I get condemned for one article, I get called, Yellow shirt, also royalist, a mad, fascist, murderer of the people. I write an article, I get called red shirt, slave to Thaksin, bought and sold by England. So what happened is, as you all know, and for those of you who consume Thai media, whether in English or in Thai, you have the appearance of red media and a yellow media, or at least leaning. Because editors and reporters are human too. And when a topic is so controversial, it's so close to heart, like the direction of your country, your way of living, your livelihood, your king, your queen, your royal family, that which defines who you are for the past 60 years. When that becomes the news topic, how do you maintain your integrity? How do you seek the truth? How do you be accurate? It is not more important to be Thai than to be a journalist, or to be Americans, or to be English, or to be whatever. Is that not more important than to be journalist? It's a matter of perception. But I'll tell you this, at the end of the day, people will believe that that is more important. That is why in every single country there are laws that contain and control the news media. In every single country, doesn't matter how liberal you are, there are laws that contain journalism. There are always the question of national securities. And it's a big question. Anything can be national securities. Anything can be national securities. If I talk back about Prayut last year, that's threatening national security. You can do it now, a little bit, not that much, hey. So the point is, journalistic ethic is there, it should always be there, we should always fight for it, we should always talk about it, we should always push it forward, but the reality again is that in the priority of how we live, journalistic ethic will always be second, third, fourth, fifth. And therefore, the main motivator, the main driver of what we do is always number one. Preservation, power, money, the bottom line. And that's the human nature. It's the same as business ethic, it's the same as political ethic, it's the same as educational ethic. So end of the day, you can expose, you can do those stories that bring down the big wave. But I will contend that those are just sacrificial lambs. You can never upset the status quo of how things are run in each country. Now going back to the pyramid, the 3 points. The media is supposed to be the check and balance between government, big business, and the people. But the media, the mainstream media, the ones that the mass consumer consume, the ones that you get to see on TV all the time, the ones that you read in the newspapers all the time, they are the ones who are owned by big business and regulated by the government. They are always and always will be at the mercy of the very people they are supposed to check. And hence, journalistic ethic will always be compromised. I had 3 TV shows. One TV show was in English, some of you may have seen it, NBT in the morning. It happened to be a government-owned channel. And I did this TV show during both the opposite government and the Yingluck government. And during the opposite government, one morning I was talking about corruption within that government. After the show, I was called by the station. asking me why was I talking about corruption. Sorry, let me rephrase it, alleged corruption in the government. And I told the person, well, because they're allegedly corrupt. And the person said, well, you can't do that. I said, why? Well, the station is owned by the government. So, during the Yingluck regime, we were reporting on the flood. And I was talking about the government's dismal performance in handling the flood. Halfway through, somebody handed me a piece of paper. Read this. I look at it. It's a list of all the wonderful things Yingluck did for the flood. I read it, but later they asked me, why did you read that? I said, well, that's a PR release. Why should I read it? And the person said, well, you know the government owns this, right? I had a TV show in Thai talking about politics again on television. I won't say what channel. It's a tape show. You tape it at the microphone in the morning. It's shown on TV on that channel in the evening. One show, I never watch my own show. I get very shy to watch myself on TV, despite the arrogant swagger that I pretend to have. You know, my producer called me. He's like, go. Okay. And the entire segment was lifted from my TV show. I was like, what happened? Then we discussed it, and it turned out to be an entire segment in which I was very critical of Kun Thaksin. Who owns True Vision. A close friend and business partner of Kun Thaksin. And I'm sure, I am certain, I am 100% certain that that person have no idea that this was going on in this new show. I have 100% certainty that he has no idea. But the people at the station, they know what to add and what not to add. They know to protect what ought to be protected. They know the bottom line, they know who to piss off and who not to piss off. Even later on, during the Yingluck, after Yingluck 1, I was even told that don't talk about this, and it's not in a good way. So just imagine, let's say for example that I am 100% virtuous, a bastion of journalistic moral, which I'm not even close, but let's pretend that I am. But then you find yourself in those circumstances. And you are pretty much powerless because you don't own the airwave. You do not own the airwave. They do. They can pull the plug anytime if they feel threatened. Anytime if they feel threatened. Even in newspapers. If they feel threatened, don't publish. Or if it's already published, then you can guarantee the next day there will be a very apologetic letter in the newspaper. In the Bangkok Post newspaper, the post-back session, you guys who expect always complain about True Vision. And the very next day there will always be a letter from the Public Relations Department of True Vision, plus a stern call. Is it good? Is it bad? I'm not here to judge. Because I tell you this, every single person that involves in everything that I just said, all they're trying to do is simply look out for their job. Look out for their job. That's what they're trying to do. Everyone has a job to do. I had an interesting conversation with an old editor once about journalistic ethics. It was a theoretical conversation. And he painted the picture for me like this. Okay, you publish a certain story. Or let's just say that okay, we have a coup d'etat, and you publish as a mainstream media, you publish condemnation of this coup d'etat, which is what you're supposed to do as a newspaper. What would happen? You will get closed down. What would happen? Thousands of people will lose their jobs. What would happen? Bills cannot get paid. Tuitions cannot get paid. Thousands of families will suffer. Now you balance that with journalistic ethic. Which do you choose? Where do you go? Where do you go with this? Which do you choose? So journalistic ethic to me is like every single thing else in life. There's always a debate. It's an eternal battle of what to do and what not to do. It's never absolute. There's always circumstances that we have to consider. And that's the condition of the human species. Whatever it is that we do is always a battle between black and white. There are always gray area. And you never know what you will actually do until you are faced with that situation. And you never make a decision based on journalistic ethic alone. You also make a decision based on human ethic, business ethic, your family, your friends, your livelihood, your future. When the time comes, you have to look at 10 different things, not just journalistic ethic, and then you make a decision. And therefore, journalistic ethic will always want to compromise, even though we try to do our best. And I'll stop there in case there's any question. Thank you.
First question? Prakandit.
Thank you very much. You talked about how it is with journalistic ethics. Can you say how it should be and how that might come about?
It should be that we seek the truth and we report the truth, be damned the consequences. It will never come about. It will only come about with, we had this discussion earlier, small media organization. You know, we have the internet, we have social media, anyone and everyone can report. There can be small media group who are idealistic in what they do, who are on the crusade of actually seeking the truth and reporting the truth to consumers. Those exist out there, but they can never become mainstream. They don't have the money to become mainstream. And once they have the money to become mainstream, they fall into the trap of what I have talked about. So the world will always need the little guys. And we hope that they remain little. Because if they become big, then they become compromised.
Thank you. Go back to your definition, seek the truth and report it, be damned the consequences. Now, the truth is not opinion. Truths are facts. The problem occurs when the journalists put their opinions onto the truth. So what do you think about that?
I think in a news report, there should be no opinion, there should be fact only. But I will tell you this, even if it's fact only, you can always frame it in a certain way to serve a certain agenda. But in theory, fact only. However, the wonderful thing is, I was never a news reporter, I'm a commentator. Putting forth my opinion was my job. So, and it's not more fun when you can put forth your opinions.
Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Tip Sudha, and I have a question. My question is, what if, for example, maybe you have a student, and then after all this talk, then he would come to you and ask, okay, so ethics have to be compromised. Then maybe I don't need to be ethical at all. Is that correct? Or why should it be ethical when it has to be compromised anyway? What would be your answer to him? What would be your advice or suggestion or?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't give this lecture to my students. And also, I'm really philosophical about things because I studied philosophy in school. We live in a world of lies and deceit, and there are such a thing as white lies. When I talk to my students, I give them all the hope, all the ideals that need. I tell them what I said earlier in my talk. You are the check and balance. You serve the function. You must, this and that. Why? Because everybody has a role to play. Right? And at the end of the day, there will be a compromise. There will always be a compromise. It's the law of Buddhism. There's a balance. There's always a compromise. But you want the compromise to be as fair as possible, if there's such a thing as fairness in life. And to be able to have that, you have to rouse this group of people. You have to give them the principles. You have to give them the belief to stand up for this thing. And then send them forward to fight the battle of good versus evil. And hence you have the balance. They will know that what I'm telling them is something I only half believe. And that's why we live in the world of the Matrix. And that's why the Matrix is such a wonderful movie. Because it reflects reality.
Short question, Robert.
Yeah. Short question. Robert Kinnear of Alternative Innovations. A quick comment regarding ethics. I learned my journalism at Glasgow University working in the student newspaper, and I objected extremely to the editor's opinions and takes, so I opted out and set up my own newspaper, waving my own flag. But my question really is regarding the UK situation, which I'm quite sure you're familiar with, like phone hacking at News of the World, which actually ended up shutting down that newspaper. What's your opinion on that mode of journalism and the ethics involved in that? And secondly, you may have noticed just very recently a journalist, again in the UK paper, the Telegraph, quit because of the reporting about HSBC, the bank, which was modified because they were protecting their advertising. Thank you.
Well, hacking the news of the world, right? The first one. I think it's a good thing. It's not obviously not a mainstream thing. It's not something that I would get on a podium and I am on a podium and say you should hack. But again, we live in a world of balance. It's always a good thing if there are groups of people that try to keep you honest, that keep you on a check. That will be to the first issue. To the second issue regarding the journalist, he has much more journalistic ethic than I would ever have to actually create a story. Because I'm not going to create a story. I still have power in it, and I'm very honest about that.
In the US, the landscape of alternative media is rich with many options. For example, Alex Jones, Infowar, and so many others. So here in Thailand, what are the alternative medias that you can recommend, especially for English speakers?
But you doesn't allow any at the moment. But I will always be very careful with alternative media, especially on the social media. I'm sure there are great ones, but the problem is you don't know who they are. A lot of time, they're so small and so out on the edge, you don't know who they are. So when you don't know who they are, how do you check for integrity? How do you check for credibility? How do you check for truth? Because also the problem with the internet is that anybody can write anything. Anybody can say anything. Anybody can make up anything. And people are very good at making things up. You know, you can Photoshop. Lately, I've seen stories of the ISIS beheading is supposedly actually done by CIA, staging it and blaming on ISIS. You know, I look at the pictures, you can't tell if it's real or not. So again, you know, there's always the good side and the bad side. Alternative media is great. But who can you actually believe? I would always read more than 5 media outlets for one single story, or don't read at all.
Okay.
Thank you, Carl. I'm Abe from Hub Co-working Space. And I just want to ask, if you're saying that mainstream media is doomed, and then we're screwed, and alternative media can be trusted, let's say if you had a kid, what would you recommend your kid, your child, about consuming media going forward in his or her entire life?
I will do as I do with my students, or at least try to do with my students, equip them with the tools so that they can filter, decipher, we talk about this, the ability to filter the news or filter anything else. End of the day, you cannot stop the evil and the badness in the world, but you can equip the child or the student with the mental ability and give them a fighting chance, and that's the best that you can do. Now, I'm not saying that news media, everything mainstream is bad or out to group you. Again, it's not good, evil, and most of the stories that you see are actual stories, in my opinion, because these are normal stories that don't threaten the status quo things. So again, it's just a matter of giving them an analytical ability to know what's what.
Which journalistic field do you think is more unethical? The one you are in now, lifestyle and fashion, or the one you left, politics?
It's a good question. Lifestyle, fashion, we make no form about it. We do it because of money. We do it because of money. We're honest about it. The most unethical would probably have to be tabloid entertainment. But I would say that even the unethical tabloid entertainment is way, 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 way less dangerous than the unethical political news, because that actually affects your life, affects the future of your society and your country every day. But I'm not saying that any news media in Thailand is unethical. God forbid, don't say that. I'm Thai. I don't say things like that. we work around it.
Yes. Kun Auntie is a SASIC alumni, and she started the management oath at SASIC.
Thank you for your talk. As a Thai, I think like one of the problems I saw from watching the news and the problem in the past few years happened. I think one of the reasons that there's no one set of facts. You have like the yellow group listening to one set of facts, red group listening to one set of facts. So we're not like discussing or arguing about the same sets of facts, and I think that's very dangerous because there's no agreement would come out of two separate sets of facts. How would a journalist be consider yourself like socially responsible and what you're reporting? I know like ethical in terms of like supporting your family, and then the news agencies they have to stay and support toxins or whatever. But how would you see yourself as being a responsible citizen in that matter?
Myself as in the news media, or myself as in Voranai?
New media, sorry.
New media, yeah. I think if you're Thai and you read Thai newspaper or consume Thai news, you pretty much know which side certain media.
That's why I stopped reading.
Yeah. Right? Theoretically, ideally, they should do that. But again, it goes back to the point when I said that, okay, journalistic ethic, patriotic duty, loyalty to king and queen. I think, especially in a country like Thailand, journalistic ethic will lose most of the time. It's something new. It's a new value in the society. And we absorb journalism from the West, not with the motivator of journalistic ethic. We absorb it, we brought it over for business interest. So when you put all those things together, journalistic ethics will often lose, and that is why we have red-leaning, yellow-leaning media landscape. And that is why I think you did the right thing. Stop reading, or read for entertainment. Read for entertainment. And there is no way we can fix that in the next 5 to 10 years. It's a matter of evolution, which starts with education.
Thank you. I'm Prabji. Are you saying that you cannot be a patriot and an ethical journalist at the same time?
Sorry?
You can't be a patriot and an ethical journalist at the same time.
Can you be a patriot and an ethical journalist at the same time? It depends on the situation. It depends on the situation. So for example, if your country is getting ready for war, like the Gulf War, after 9/11, and here we talk about one of the most liberal countries in the world, and with so large media landscape, and the liberal, the conservative, for head-to-head for tens and tens of years. But after 9/11, and with the decision to invade Iraq, which media opposed it? Mainstream. At least in my experience, CNN, NBC, Fox, the mainstream media, they went along with it as a whole organization. We're not talking about individual commentators. And therefore, patriotic and journalistic ethic, you can go together, but it depends on what you believe at the time. It depends on what you believe at the time, it depends on the situation. If you have a divided country like Thailand, red and yellow, which side is patriotic, you don't even know. Which side is considered patriotic. And where does journalistic ethic come in there? Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, which you believe, I would say they sacrifice patriotism or whatever for journalistic ethics because they actually want to publish the truth without red tape. It's a difficult question to answer.
It is, but I would not, I mean, they did sacrifice patriotism. I would say that they would rather go patriot than people who declare themselves to be patriot. I mean, you have to bring out what, like you yourself said, you criticize your country because you love it and you want it to be better. So, if you criticize your country, you are not being a patriot, but at the same time, for me, you are a patriot who wants to see things changing.
I thank you for that, but that's also, it brings back to the matter of perception. A lot of people think I'm unpatriotic because I criticize my country. I get letters from Thai people telling me, how dare you, how can you, especially telling these foreigners that back is more Thailand. They consider me a traitor, whereas I consider myself I'm doing service to my country. Looking at the flaws in order to correct and change. Again, it's perception. How you look at it, from which spectrum you look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a website, and it's not a political website, it's a literary website, travel stories, poems, things like that, but I sometimes write about life in Thailand, and my friends in America ask me, why don't I write about the political situation on my blog page? And I tell them, well, we're all afraid, all the bloggers I know here are afraid to write about the political situation. We're afraid we'll have our visas revoked, or we'll be invited, for attitude adjustment, or we might be in prison. And so I want to ask what advice you have for people with their own personal websites or blogs.
Don't go to prison. Don't go to prison. It's an individual decision. I mean, how much are they willing to sacrifice? How much are they passionate about a particular issue? I can't speak for different people. Personally, I don't think it does any good to go to prison over this situation right now in Thailand, which is not Syria, which is not North Korea. So it depends on the situation.
You already highlight the fact that ethics is a matrix. It's true that for certain parts of the world, which could be ethics for some others, could be as well non-ethic for other people. So taking this into consideration, plus in top of that, all the pressures that a journalist can have, like political, personal, business, all kind of pressure, what do you think could be the future of the journalism? It will be another entertainment, or it will be something, it will be difficult to share some kind of true information in the future? Taking into consideration as well that we are going to live in more globalization world, which means that the ethics matrix will be more and more difficult to understand.
Well, no matter what it is, you will always be at the mercy of government regulation. But you can actually follow business model. We discussed this, the Guardian, right? Being a non-profit news media organization. So presumably, in theory, you're not at the mercy of the bottom line. And that, if that happens, you already free yourself from half of the half of the spectrum that can control you, which is sponsorship, advertisements, so on and so forth. So you can be more liberal about your reporting. But also, at the same time, you are still at the mercy of government regulation. Then it's just a matter of the government that you have, how liberal they are, how much freedom they're willing to give.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about such kind of pressure. Could be as well ethics, like for religious issues. Like in Western, we have the freedom of speech, which is above all. And for other religion, we can talk about some subjects which are very sensitive. So what kind of approach? It's very difficult to talk freely with such kind of ethics. Well, that's a very difficult subject. Well, my personal and humble opinion is that the journalistic ethic, religious freedom, so on and so forth, I think at the end of the day, we could all use a bit of simple human decency and give respect to other cultures, even if you don't agree with it. You know, not the world doesn't have to fit our personal standard and measurement. Give a bit of empathy and human decency and respect for the differences, even though we don't agree with it, even though we think it's stupid, even though we think it's a joke, then we don't agree, but still, human decency. And we might not have all these problems.
Last question, and then other questions can go to him personally.
You were talking about how during the Gulf War there was each media outlet would have its own particular viewpoint. I found during that time it a very interesting time because the idea of democracy and the idea of patriotism was being discussed, certainly on CNN, certainly in the New York Times, in Daily Telegraph, in The Guardian. And it was the journalist's job to put up differing views on both sides of the story, and two different journalists on the same page may have different views that come out, and having a much more subtle approach to news reporting as opposed to this is right, this is wrong. And I don't think any one journalist can make that difference. It's the collection of journalists to call it as they see it. Now, admittedly, there are economic pressures from above. But I think there's probably a place in the market in Thailand for that type of reporting.
I think that's a very good point, and this made me think of something and allow me to keep a pat on the back to the Bangkok Post, my former employer for a long time. People will always say that the Bangkok Post is yellow leaning, you know, but I will always tell them, look at the commentary pages. You will see red shirt writer and yellow shirt writer. Kun Suranan Wechashiwa, I wouldn't call him red shirt, but he always did with the Thai party. He writes for the Bangkok Post all the time. And of course, we get gone Tadikawanit writing for the Bangkok Post also. So people have their agenda. People have their own personal, so on and so forth. But if, insofar as the news media, we can provide a platform and give the bias to both sides, I think we're doing our job. So that's one thing that the Bangkok Post has been doing quite well on, is giving voice to both sides.
give Voranai a round of applause.